This lecture will cover graphic design and illustration as art processes. The word graphic design, or the words graphic design, basically just means something that's been made by people, and so this could be printed objects or other spaces that have been designed, and other design disciplines. So, professional designers, some see themselves more as solving problems, where others see themselves as artists. So it kind of depends on the person, and I think good ones kind of do both. As consumers, we're the ones that get to decide what designs are successful or not. When the form and function work together, we say that it's designed well, and when it doesn't, we say it's designed poorly. And we've all probably bought products before because they look cool, but then they didn't really work great. Maybe it's a car that looks nice, but it doesn't have a good engine. But there's always things like that. That maybe it's clothing that looks nice, but it's not really comfortable. And so, it's we as consumers, we like to try to find those things that look nice, but also that function to serve their purpose. Now, when we say graphic design or design disciplines, there's so many things that fall under that category. And these things are all art related. Maybe not all of these people that work in these fields see themselves as artists, but some do. Some kind of do these things to make money, and then make painting and drawing and sculpture and things like that on the side. So it can vary. I know people that have worked for big companies like Nordstrom or J.C. Penney, and they did all their graphic design, but then they also were painters or photographers, making their own name as well. So under design, we could talk about graphic design, which is like the printed material and advertisements that we see. Industrial design, textile design, that's basically designing different textiles like fabrics, and surfaces like that have patterns on them. Clothing design or fashion design, interior design, architecture, even environmental design and landscaping is a type of design discipline. Now, unlike the other types of art that we've talked about in this class, graphic design is the only one we don't have to go to a gallery or museum to see. It's all around us. It gets mailed to us, it's on our phones, it's on our social media, it's in our mailboxes. And so they don't have to really get us to go anywhere because it's around us all the time. And most graphic designers are their main goal is to just get us to do something. So the main goal of graphic design is to get us to do something, to buy something, to go somewhere, to think a certain way. So it can vary. So these are the main vocabulary words that you need to know for this chapter. Graphic design, like I said, is a process of working with words and pictures to create solutions to problems of visual communication. This would include website design and things like that as well. Logos are identifying trademarks that are based upon letter forms. So some companies use letter forms for their logo, and some companies use symbols to represent their company. And a symbol is based upon pictorial forms. And some people, they do a combination of both. Even our fonts, the lettering that we use, is an art form. Before we had computers and typewriters, people handmade little blocks that had these letters on them for printing. And they would have to hand set all of those letters to make every newspaper and magazine. It was such a time consuming process that was a type of printmaking. But before that, artists did it by hand with ink. And so nowadays, when we have the ability to do everything on a computer or our phones, and people don't use capital letters and periods, it's kind of hard to understand, seeing as how people used to have to do so many things by hand in such a time consuming manual labor. It almost seems disrespectful to not use proper grammar and punctuation. So these are some examples of symbols that we recognize. Again, symbols are based upon pictorial sources, where logos are represented by letter forms. And so some companies we recognize more by a symbol, and some we recognize more by a logo. And that's going to tie into the assignment that you do where you have to design your own personal logo or symbol. So some companies, their logos have lasted a very long time. Companies like Coca-Cola, NASA, but they're always changing them up a little bit, making them look new or slightly different. But then there's always something that's still really easy to recognize. And I think when companies change things up too much, that's when they can either gain a whole new audience or lose an audience and possibly have unsuccessful times or even lose their companies. Another company, Absolute Vodka. I'm not promoting drinking or anything like that, but Absolute Vodka for decades, every design that they have that comes out, it's different, and sometimes it references different social or political issues. It makes reference maybe to artists, famous artists. If you watch the video about Keith Haring, he got to design an Absolute Vodka logo. So did Andy Warhol and Basquiat. So they're always different, and there's books you can find that have the decades worth of all their different designs, but there's always a silhouette of a bottle, and then it says Absolute in it somewhere. This woman used to be a graphic designer and then started doing painting and other things, and this was one of her pieces just to show the power of a letter and a color scheme and a font. But she took different products that we see at the grocery store and she used just one letter to represent the alphabet. And as you go through looking at each of these, you definitely will start to think of different products. And so this shows the power of advertising and branding, that just by looking at one letter, you think of a product. So just think of all the other influences that we have around us. But you can go through all of these. Like there's all detergent, Bubblicious, Campbell, Dentyne, Eggo, Frito, Gatorade, Hi-C, Icy, Jello, Kool-Aid, Lysol, M&M's, Nilla wafers, Oreos, Pez, Q-tips, Reese's, Starburst, Tide, Uncle Ben's, Velveeta. Uh, I'm not sure what the W is, or the X. The Y is I think York peppermint patties, and then Zest soap. So just going through those really quickly. I don't have these memorized. Like they just pop into your head if you shop at the grocery store. So it's kind of interesting to see how influenced we are by these images. So what's different with an illustration than a work of maybe another type of art is that illustrations are usually images that follow a written or preconceived idea. And so, like if you were to illustrate a children's book, obviously the story would be written first, and then based upon the story, you would create the images. Or based upon a textbook over anatomy, the artist would design the drawings. And so, some people see illustration as a lower form of art because the idea is not original to the artist. But I disagree with that because some people illustrate their own work, and some of the most famous art that we see throughout history was illustrations of religion and culture and things like that. So I think illustration is just as much fine art as any other type of art that we have to see because we're all influenced by different things. One of the most famous American illustrators is Norman Rockwell. Now, illustrations are everywhere. Cartoons are a type of illustration, as well as the illustrations that we have in our textbook. And illustrations are very important. It's not just children's books. If we didn't have illustrations in our textbooks, imagine taking biology or anatomy and not having those diagrams and illustrations to help you understand the content of the writing. So illustrations are very important, and it's very much a career option for people that are interested in art and also doing something maybe more in a professional field and not working just as an independent artist making self-expressive work.